would be done. You know.
What happened at the voter registration project in Jalalabad?
Voter registration, that was the project after, where this was now Karzai's here, and we're going to have this vote to make sure he stays. That's what that was about. And
no puppet government there, folks.
So they'd sent me up to Jalalabad, which is on the border with, or roughly on the border with Pakistan. And the border crossing there is called Torkham border. Jalalabad is where bin Laden's family had lived, all that kind of stuff. So we went up there, and we were really starting to instigate this. There's going to be this here, that here, voter registration, this, and monitor and all this kind of stuff, and give ground truth, and feed it back. And the first thing is we went to we were invited to the Pakistan sort of consulate building in Jalalabad, where the guy says, the Pakistan official says, if you've got the dollars, you can have the Pakistan passport. So we were buying Pakistan passports, because obviously we were that far away from Kabul that going across the Torkham border, if anything went wrong, became a viable option for us for running, for escaping evasion and running away. So that's what happened there. So we went there. We did that. I mean, there were rocket attacks and everything on the night time. It were horrendous. Yeah. There's the Taliban firing rockets. On the night time.
What, you just see them in the sky?
No, they were landing, and you could hear the explosions.
It feels like so casual, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just rockets flying.
Rockets.
Yeah, it was just so.
They were landing.
Yeah.
As rockets do.
Yeah, and I thought
It sounds like fireworks.
I mean, they're a bit bigger than fireworks, but yeah,
they kill people.
So it was like we lived in this guest house, and actually we'd been put together with this driver, right? And one of the things is we had to go and get like a J.R. Hartley fishing type jacket that they all wear over the shalwar kameez thing, the long shirt. They all wear these, all the Afghans do, and they wear this hat with a rim right called pakul and all this kind of stuff. So we were down the market buying all this type of stuff, trying to fit in. And I've turned around because there's somebody following us, right? And I'm like, what on earth do you want, type thing? And I got quite aggressive with this fella, saying like, if you don't get yourself off, like, I'll snap you in half, type thing. So then this guy I was with, called Andy, says, well, what's the matter? So I says, this guy following us around, all the time. He says, of course he's the driver, right? But all I'd seen is the back of his head. So I'd never seen his face. So I was thinking, who on earth is this following us around all the time, and anyway. But so I did about 8 weeks there, and I thought, this is not for me. We'd moved accommodation a couple of times. Some lads had come to join us, and they'd been farmed out to the different areas. And then when I left, 2 of those lads, they got shot, by the Taliban.
Wow.
And killed. And
what were the circumstances?
I think they'd been up by the border. They'd been living there, and everything was sort of all right. And I think they'd gone to have a meeting with supposedly like a tribal elder or whatever, and get ground truth on what the situation was. And as they come back on foot through the woods, they got shot in the back by Taliban.
Wow.
And that's as I understand it, And I, to be honest with you, I was just glad to be out of it, There were all manner of stuff going on there where they were saying, we don't want you to have weapons.
Well done.
Well, yeah. My policy was up there we'd got this float of cash, and we hired weapons and wrote down on the receipts that it were for something else, for food and all kinds of stuff, and bottled water. But ultimately I hired weapons, because it's one thing getting caught out and not having a weapon. If you've got one, at least you've got the choice of whether you use it or not. And so I'd left by then, so I didn't really know the ins and outs of it. And the people who I tried to talk to were very tight-lipped about it. I
had a relative out there. They got surrounded by the Taliban, and they called in the air support, and it's when the enemy's so close to the friendly. It's
Danger close.
It's called a bug squash, a bug crush, or something. The bombing.
Bug crush.
It's that, and anyway, they all had to hunker down, and while the bombs came down, and it was really close to them getting squashed as well.
Yeah.
Bug squash or bug crush. I can't remember what he said it was called.
Yeah, danger close. Yeah,
Danger close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's. Yeah, that was it really. I just, to be honest with you, when they started with the weapons thing and you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do the other, I really thought that's it for me. You know, it's time to move on. Do you know what I mean?
It's really felt like taking the piss, though.
Well, it's great for somebody sat in Kabul to tell you, you know, hundreds of miles away, you can't do this out in the countryside. You can't do that. Well, yeah, but you're sat there safe, aren't you? You know, it's us who are up here not so safe.
Might as well put some glow sticks on and just run around.
Yeah. So I was a bit, so I thought that was then the time for me to move on, and that's what happened. Was I resigned. I didn't fall out with anybody, but I did resign, and I got I think I can't remember. I got an aeroplane, you know, like a small aircraft, fixed wing aircraft back, like a 6-seater thing, UN type plane, back to Kabul. Got picked up. I think I spent one night in the villa in the centre of Kabul with the rest of the lads who were down there. And the following day, I was flown out. And,
well, this is interesting that you ended up as Baghdad as a security and risk consultant for Reuters. Because wasn't it the Assange video that the Reuters journalists got friendly fire? No, they got assassinated, didn't they, by the helicopters?
Yeah.
Collateral, what's it called? Collateral murder, collateral damage.
I'll tell you what that was. That was the guy. It wasn't by if it's the
wasn't it the Americans that were controlling it from?
They fired from a tank, didn't they? He spun round with a camera on his shoulder and pointed it at a tank, and the guy thought it was a rocket launcher and opened up fire. But he was a local national, not sort of but he was working for Reuters. You're right.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name now, but I did go there for round about 5 weeks, and then the guy who had those contracts who was providing security personnel. I went from Reuters. I went to NBC News, which was in a different part of Baghdad, and I lived in a hotel called the Alhambra. With another 4 or 5 lads who were doing the same as me. That's what happened there. So I didn't stay at Reuters for particularly long. It was just really, I think, probably the guy who ran the company, it was his way of getting me into the system. And then I went down to CNN. I think I did about 12 months with CNN. And
what would you do for NBC News?
So NBC News, and very much the same as any other media organisation, they're looking to obviously gather the news in a timely manner and get it out there in whatever format, whether it be TV or newspaper or whatever, you know, war photography, things like that. So they would go on the ground and they would meet people, they would have fixers, they would organise interviews and all manner of stuff, you know. And so you would go with them and basically tell them what the safest practice was on the ground, movement about from A to B, timings, body armour.
So the people over, sort of the journalists over in Ukraine at the moment,
yes.
Would they have security?
Yes, and right. I've actually, during this last couple of weeks, I've been offered a position in Ukraine with Fox News.
Oh wow!
It's through a third party. It's not from Fox directly, but yeah, I've been offered that, you know. But the money's not there anymore, you know. So it doesn't, because if you know there is the risk reward thing of always. So the reward wasn't there for the risk, you see. I have actually been to Russia a couple of times, and probably I've been down towards the Crimea, and I did a report in 2017 for a company that were going to fly. You know, when the Crimea got annexed, I went in 2017 for a British company that were going to fly drones for the UN, and they were going to monitor the demilitarised zone. And I went to Kiev, got on the train, and went all the way down there to Donetsk Oblast, it was called. And I stayed there for about 3 or 4 days and wrote this report on whether it was safe or not. I mean, ultimately it wasn't, but as you can imagine, as you know now, but that's what they wanted to do, is fly these drones, you know, from this airfield that was close to the demilitarised zone. But in that demilitarised zone, there were Russian special forces and all manner of people cutting about in the middle of the night. So,
Where is Janusian? And it sounds like it was pretty harrowing.
Janusian was. So once I left NBC News, it was coming to an end. There was a lot of infighting and so on and so forth. And I went home, and it was like, you never got the call to come back type thing, you know. And then I think whoever had that contract, a guy called Paul, he lost it and he went to someone else. I went to Sabre, which was predominantly all ex-SF at the time, ex-Special Forces guys. After Sabre, I went to Janusian, and I was there about, I think the first rotation was for 6 weeks. I ended up doing 7. But I knew straight away, this is like, it was too fast and loose, you know. They were targeted all the time. You sort of, there were letters getting thrown over the perimeter wall, because we had 2 villas, and you know, those letters were from Al Qaeda saying, we know where you are, we know who you are, all this kind of stuff. And one Sunday we'd been out, and it was like, you've got to come back straight away, come back now. So we come back, and there was a vehicle shot to pieces in the car park in the front of the villa, with the tarpaulin over it and 2 dead bodies in it, you know. And they stayed there for 2 or 3 days, and I was just like, this is so bad for morale. Do you know what I mean? Because if people see that and think that's how you get treated when something bad's happened. So I got there was all manner of nonsense there, to be honest with you. There were some good lads, and the problem wasn't with the good lads, it was with the management. And I just thought, you know, this is for me. So I agreed to stay an extra week, and I did do. I got to the airport and I had my resignation already saved in an email, and literally connected to the internet and fired it straight off. And then from there I went to CNN with friends of mine who were already there. And that was a good job, you know. Went to the Saddam trial with some journalists, saw Saddam, you know, there the night when he
refused to wear a hood, didn't he?
Yeah. I wasn't there when he got hanged, but I was in Baghdad at the time, and somebody showed me the video straight away.
What were the locals like about it?
Some were pleased, but remember when Saddam was, you know, I mean, don't get me wrong, he wielded the big stick, but they knew where they stood. They really did, you know. And he was a nuisance to the Western world, which is probably why he had to go. You know, he wouldn't toe the line. But there were no Al Qaeda in Iraq when Saddam were there. There were no, you know. A lot of people say what a good place. You know, who am I to judge? You know, so. I mean, there are a lot of nightmare stories. I used to. There was a guy who worked for CNN called Hamid, and he'd been in Saddam's secret police. So I was talking to him one day, and I said, you know, did you ever meet Saddam? He said, I met him twice. I said, oh, really? He says, yeah. He said, the first time I'd got a call, we want you on a checkpoint in the north of Baghdad on this main road, and you and your team and all this kind of stuff. And he said, look out for this car, look out for this person, and all this kind of stuff. He says, well, that car never came, and I never saw that person at the checkpoint, you know, otherwise we would have stopped him and apprehended him for whatever, and this, that, and the other. He says, when I got home that night, they told me, a car will come. You have to go to Believer's Palace, which is the palace where Saddam ran the Ba'ath Party from, and the political party, and that's where he did his business. So he says, you take off all your watch and you leave everything valuable at home because you might not come back. Mm-hmm. So you say goodbye to everybody and you get in the car and off you go. He says, and when I got there, everybody else were there who was in my team, you know, another 5 guys. He said, and we stood in the forecourt of Believer's Palace, and Saddam come out and he ranted and raved and slapped everybody around the face. Then they were put on the knees, hooded, with hoods on and this, that and the other. And then after about an hour, they took the hoods off and said, right, get your sends off home type of thing. He says, and then the next time, it was the same situation. A car will come, and they went through the same rigmarole, and he gave them all $1,000.
What?
So, madness. Just, and that's what he told me, and he'd been in the secret police, like so. And to be fair, I got no reason to disbelieve him. He was very genuine about it all, and he said,
"Imagine meeting Saddam Hussein."
Yeah. So
you go from that to world famous football players.
Yeah. So there was an ex-Hereford lad who was doing the security at Manchester United, and I met someone else there who he'd not been at Hereford, but he had a very successful bodyguard, ex-military guy.
Sorry, how do football players need that much security? Need SAS guys? I think how much
keep
danger?
Keep the women off them.
Yeah,
I think some of it's the kudos factor. Do you know what I mean? Like check out my, it's a bit like my car thing.
We've gone from Saddam Hussein to these like Premiership multi-millionaire football players. Yeah.
So one of the guys who was a director of Sabre, also. That was he was a major shareholder in the security at Manchester United. And so that's how I ended up there. And I knew him from Hereford as well. So that's the connection. And then they'd phoned up and said, and at that time it was, this SIA thing, the Security Industry Authority, they were coming into force. And even though you were qualified as a bodyguard, it was a bit like, well, where did you get qualified? How did you get qualified? Who passed you? And so you had to go do this refresher. So he was running these kind of qualifications that were regulated, and I went there and said, "Look, could you help me out? Could you do this?" Yes, no problem. And so that's how I got the license, even though I was already qualified type thing. And it's basically just check. Do you know this much, that much, the other much?
What were they like?
He's a good guy. Yeah. Oh, the footballers, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They were all right.
Can you name them?
Yeah, my son was about one at the time. And I got a nephew the same age, and I got shirts from Ronaldo. It was so the first time round, like so. Also, we did at the same time we did the pre-World Cup warm-up games for England. So I got shirts off Beckham. I was asking for two all the time. Do you know what I mean? One for my son, one for my nephew. John O'Shea was one. Which, I think I got 3 or 4 shirts at the, so some of them were all right. Some of them were funny,
Some of them were wankers.
Like, and I remember one night. I can't remember what it was. I think it was England that played. Might have been Hungary or something like in this pre-World Cup warm-up thing. And I always remember you used to have to go to the end of the tunnel, but not the pitch side, the other side where they're going to the car park. And apparently part of their contract is that you go sign autographs and things for fans and that, it's so somebody like Beckham, extremely professional and diligent, I did 45 minutes with fans and that, and he's a very affable fella, to be fair, from what I remember. Rooney the same. But you'd get others who they'd walk past the disabled kids and that, and dearie me, I can't abide by that. I mean, people who've got literally zero to live for, and they move in the wheelchair with a mouth, and I couldn't see that. I thought that was so poor, and there were plenty of officials taking balls and shirts off
to their head.
Yeah, and certainly there were certain ones that did it and certain ones that didn't, and I just thought that's poor. That's really poor. But, each to their own. Because I suppose at the end of the day, when you put your head on your pillow, you've got to live with yourself.
Yeah.
So
then it's over to Ozzy Osbourne's family.
Yeah. So I'd got a mate of mine, an ex-commando lad, had I think he'd been in Japan with Kelly Osbourne. She went to be a geisha girl or something, live like whatever it was for 5 weeks and get all done up like this geisha. And I think he'd had enough, to be fair. And so when the media, I think it was called Scottish Media Group, they'd phoned him up and said, look, Jack Osbourne is going to do this Mongol rally thing from Hyde Park in London by vehicle all the way to Ulaanbaatar in the capital of Mongolia. Are you up for it? He said, no, I'm not available, but I know the man who is. So I guess this phone call, you're going to get a phone call from this guy. And anyway, I thought they phoned up and I went down there. They were nice people. Got introduced to Jack. And
when you heard about it, were you like, yes, this is the best job of my life?
No, not really.
No?
I've never been like that. You know, I've always been very like, yeah, it's all right. That type. I've never, do you know, even Man United. I mean, when I got to Man United, they said to me, do you want to tour around? You know, just us, like, you know, around this, that, and the other. I went, no, you're all right. And they were like, you're the first person to ever turn us down for a. I was like, no. I mean, I looked after the Glazers there as well. Edward and Sherry Glazer, who's the youngest son of the owner. I think it's Malcolm Glazer, and. You know, I used to sit behind Jack Charlton in the thing, but I was never ever
never starstruck.
No, and I used to talk to Wolf McGuinness, who was after Sir Matt Busby, I think, was all that type of stuff. Nice fellas, you know, but I was never. I mean, I remember once going with Edward Glazer that opened up the mega store, or whatever it's called, at Manchester United, just for him and his wife, and he was like, "If you want anything, just put it in with mine." I was like, "No, you're all right."
What if the tour guide had have been Bill Clinton?
I'd already turned Bill down, so he probably wouldn't give me a second chance. But
from private security.
Well, we'll go through what you did with Jack Osbourne first.
Oh, go on then. Yeah. So, they were going to make a 2-part series about this trip to Mongolia. And he got some of his friends, some of his cronies, you know. and so we went to, is it Welders, where his mum and dad have a place in... I
don't know, and it's in their big house.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
LA or something.
That's it, yeah. So it's I can't remember the name.
The dog was like shit.
Chalfont St. Peter. Chalfont St. Peter is somewhere like in Berkshire.
Have you been there?
Yes.
Were there loads of dogs?
No, because they weren't sort of in residence at the time. I think they were in America, but Jack had been staying there, so that's where we went to meet him. And then he come into London, and there was we went for an Indian and all this kind of stuff, and there was a bit of a pre-rally party or whatever that we attended, and he introduced me to some of his pals and that. And
anyone we know?
No, there was a girl there called. I can't remember her name now, but anyway, her father was the sort of CEO of NBC News. Mm. Yeah, and he was quite a powerful fellow, like, you know. That was it, really. It took about 7 weeks to get there. It was a great trip, you know.
I've watched the Genghis Khan movies. What's Mongolia like these days? It was. Some of it was because we did it in the summer, so we had really good weather all the way through. Oh, nice. And we drove this expedition prepared. We were in a support vehicle, so we drove this expedition prepared Mitsubishi Warrior type thing. They had 1,000cc cars or less. That was part of the race rules or the rally rules. And it was just a great thing. I met some good people, you know, and some interesting fellas who'd, one had driven a taxi, like this black cab, and had the meter going and all that kind of stuff there.
How much was the fare at the end?
I can't remember, but it was something extortionate, you know, I don't know, 70-odd grand or something like that, whatever it was. So, but it was just a fun thing, and but by the end of it, I really had enough of them. Because it was almost like you'd got to hold their hand all the time, and I think Jack had enough towards the end. You know, he didn't really want to get involved in stuff, and so we crossed this river early one morning, and it had been quite high, the water. But I'd been talking to people because this was a regular thing for these locals. And they was like, oh, if you wait, it dies down. So I was like, all right, okay. So we waited and we got across. But they were struggling for footage. for Jack, you know. So anyway, coming behind us was like a Russian minibus, military minibus, but full of women and children, and it got stuck. Well, we'd got this kinetic tow rope, so I was like, look, you know, why don't we get the kinetic tow rope out and we'll wade out and we'll fasten it up and pull. So they were saying trying to get Jack to buy into this, and he was like, well, I'll do it if Neil joins in. And I said, yeah, come on then, you know, but it's not a TV programme about Neil, you know, that's what it's not. But in the end, he said the water were too cold, and I was left there sort of in my underpants up to. No. Yeah, and I was just like, dearie me, do you know what I mean? So anyway, we pulled him out, and there was tons of applause and all this, but obviously he didn't get involved, so that was never ever used. So he missed an opportunity to show himself
like
in
a good guy.
Yeah.
How was Jack with the food out there?
He did as well as everybody else.
What was it you were eating?
Well, we tried everything. Do you know what I mean? Sort of, was it goat's stomach curry and all this kind of stuff? No, I mean, we went to a yurt. You know, the sort of round tent with the yak hair and all that kind of stuff, and they'd got this cauldron of fat bubbling away, and they were spooning it out. And I mean,
that's like your worst nightmare.
Oh, dearie me. I mean, you just got to have a sip. You daren't eat it all because they just fill it up. So you just take a sip and say, that's great, and just leave it to one side, you know. So
Was it all right?
No. No, it wasn't. No, most definitely not.
No insects on the menu?
No, I didn't see that. I'll tell you the most interesting bit was everybody had got a golden eagle. Everybody.
What?
Yeah, everybody had got a golden eagle. So you'd come across these people, they just got like a juvenile golden eagle on their forearm. And I was just like, he's got a golden eagle. Do you know what I mean? You can probably only see them in the islands of Scotland here. And there's probably, I don't know, maybe 10 mating pairs, say, or something like that, to guess. But like everybody...
It's like having a dog out there.
Everybody had got these golden eagles. So it's just like, yeah, it's just got a golden eagle. So it's quite... And then we went through... Kazakhstan, because went through Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, went through every stand, you know. But in Kazakhstan, went to Almaty, and they'd organised a live kill. So they'd got the guy come out with the full wizard's kit on and everything, the proper wizard hat on, you know, the baggy sleeves and all this kind of stuff. And he brought this eagle out, and then they put a rabbit out and sent it, and it cost $5,000 apparently. So. But it was quite fascinating to watch, you know, because quite rare, I suppose, to see that to see it live. Wow. So it was quite privileged to see it.
So then you go to private security contract to a multi-millionaire businessman, an entrepreneur, and strike up an amazing friendship. Yeah,
so that's a guy in Leeds who his name's Jeffrey, and he invented. Vehicle tracking, pioneering vehicle tracking, so vehicle telematics and so on and so forth. Oh, wow. And you know, he was. I obviously prior to this, I didn't know him. I didn't know anything about vehicle telematics or anything. But I got a call from some friends of mine who said, you know, we're struggling. This, that, and the other. There's a sensitive issue in Leeds. Could you come and shed some light on it? So I went up there, shed some light on it, and became friends with him. And to this day, you know, we're closest friends. So, yeah, fantastic thing, you know, and he's a great guy, yeah. Maritime security. Yeah, so that came about by a guy down at Hereford who was an ex-sergeant major who I worked under, a guy called Phil. He's had his own, I think he had half of a company, and his other friend had the other half of the company, and they were out doing maritime security in the Gulf of Aden against the Somali pirates. You know, and I'd phoned him up, spoke to a mutual friend who was the ops manager in England, and said, you know, what if I come down and speak to you? Yeah, come down, and went down, and it's like, when can you go? So flew out there to Salalah in Oman. I did a month on the boats up and down the Gulf of Aden, stopping off in Djibouti, all manner of stuff. And then I became the ops manager. and looked after the operations for him for the next 5 months. Stayed out there for 6 months, and then I came home. But that was a great thing, you know. We lived in a villa, literally 1 meter's pathway, and then onto the beach, and then the sea, and it was just.
Did you encounter any pirates?
I never saw any. No.
Yeah.
What I did nearly do was, so the ship pulls in at off the coast of Djibouti, about 32 nautical miles off the coast of Djibouti. At that time, this was sort of, these transits were new to the company. So we'd got what's known as like an agent in Djibouti, who was an ex-legionnaire called Johnny, I think. A British guy, but he's been in the French Foreign Legion. And he was going to facilitate the back and forth from the ship to land. So obviously you think, I've never met the guy. You think it's going to be a white guy on a boat and so on and so forth, and he's going to make himself known to you and all this kind of stuff. Well, lo and behold, as they're coming towards us, it's two black guys in the same boats as what the pirates use, this 18-foot skiff. So obviously I was like up for opening fire, you know, because guess what? By now our ship, which is like 330 metres long, has come to a halt. You know, so we're literally wallowing in, like, anybody can come and take us. So I was ready to start firing, you know, and then all of a sudden they came over the radio and like it's us, Mr. Johnny Sanders and all this kind of stuff like so. But that was such a strange period of time because everything was just not how you would have wanted it. So like, you're 32 nautical miles at sea, it's pitch black, there's no life vests, there's no sat-nav, there's nothing. You've just got two black lads who you've never met before, you don't know whether they're right uns or wrong uns, and we're bashing through the sea, the waves are like 6 foot, and I'm thinking, this is, if all goes wrong, what are we doing? You know, who are we calling? What are we doing? Because nobody knows we're here. And anyway, we make it to the port. 2 days later, we come back, and we're coming out early morning, and we can see in the distance this massive furrow in the sea, like froth and everything. And there's a slick on the water, an oil slick. As we get closer, it's a baleen whale that's like 3 times its normal size, and tiger sharks feeding on it.
Oh my God.
So if you cast your mind back 48 hours before, and we're bashing through, and a shark feeds at night, we're bashing through the water, and like, oh dearie me. And I was just like, that is so bad. Do you know what I mean? And then the next thing was, we speak to this Johnny, and we're like, listen, this 18-foot skiff thing's no good. Don't worry about that. I've got a proper boat coming. Well, when this proper boat came, it was like some pleasure cruiser off Lake Windermere. It had got no keel. So, you know, when something hasn't got a keel and it's on choppy water, it's just rocking from side to side. And I mean, there were tons of us with green faces and all kinds of stuff. You had to lay down and... Yeah, so anyway, that was that. But it all, you know, it were all right. We got he organised the weapons from the French Foreign Legion, these Dragunov sniper rifles, and when we got back up to Salalah, we didn't have the permissions to land with them, so we threw them in the sea. We had to ditch them in the sea, throw them in the sea, all the ammunition, everything, the sights and everything.
Otherwise, you would have ended up like the Chennai Five.
Yes,
we had one of them on here.
Yeah,
we ended up in prison in India.
Exactly. Yeah, without the permissions. So then, when we get to the port, it's like you're not supposed to have body armor either. They don't like these type of security things. So I was in the port, trying to get the body armor to stay under the water, throwing it into the water and trying to, but it kept floating because it was body armor that had been bought from SBS lads. So it's like got this flotation thing. So anyway, so you know the steps like down the side of the down the side of the quay and into the water. So I was down there, sort of like 6 foot under, jamming the body armour behind the steps and trying to keep it there, so we didn't get caught. So yeah, then you go check in, wet through. Everyone's like, what's he been doing? So anyway, that's what we've been doing. And I came home. Yeah, I came home after 6 months, and that was it. I'd done enough.
So from Oman to Kabul.
I love how blasé you are about everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the thing is, because I think there's probably lads out there who've done plenty of them who've done the same as me, So
So modest.
well, I think, I'd gone. I think I went back to Kabul after that. I think that was for the Centre for International Development, State University, New York. And I think what that is it's so the State University of New York's got a set of academics called the Centre for International Development. They bid for aid money, sometimes US aid money or whatever it is, and then they take that money to a developing country and they capacity build in one form or another. And the project that they were doing at that time was in Kabul, and it was with the Afghanistan Parliament, and they were capacity building. So they were going and teaching them really how to be an effective government and effective parliamentary and all this kind of stuff. And that's what. So I was responsible for around about, I think it was 18 expats and about 92 local nationals for their security. So I did that. Did 45 days the first time, because it was more like an audit thing to do for them and see what they needed, what they didn't need, because they did have a security provider who wasn't doing what they should have been doing. So there was shortfalls and gaps in security and risk, and I highlighted those. So
it was back to working for media companies.
Yeah, at that time I met with a guy who was a friend of mine. I'd known him previously. He was working with New York Times, and he said, I think you'd fit in. Why don't you come across? I went across and we had something to eat and all that kind of stuff, coffees, teas. And then I left that previous job and started with them. But the first rotation for them was back in Baghdad. I did 4 weeks then. I think I came home, quickly turned around and went straight out to Afghanistan again. And started with the New York Times, yeah.
What does diligence investigations mean?
So diligence investigations is a company in London. It was previously in the Middle East, doing the same type of stuff as what I've just talked about, Sabre and all that type of stuff. And then they come back to London and they did investigations, corporate investigations, due diligence, things like that. And they were predominantly getting their work from the Russians.
Ooh.
So
Are you able to talk about these Russians?
I think so, yeah. So they predominantly got their work through one guy who was representing one arm of a group, and that group is owned by quite a very big name who's on the sanctions list. Probably a personal friend of Vladimir Putin's. And he was passing the work, and a lot of the work was for ENRC, the Eurasian National Resources Company, who go around and exploit developing countries for mineral wealth and so on and so forth. And it was like recovering assets, recovering money. There was tons of jobs, and I was involved in quite a few. One where a mine in Brazil had been sold with false licensing for transport and export of iron ore, and so ENRC were trying to take Zamin, an Indian company, to court over it, this, that and the other. So, and they'd got somebody to flip and come onto their side and tell their story of how these fake licenses go. And so I was provided as a bodyguard to that person, and he was also a politically exposed person. So his family had been very senior in the government in Brazil. So we travelled all around Brazil. He was very well known. His name is very, very well known.
Any hairy moments?
Because in all of this, when he flipped sides, he'd he'd upset a lot of people in Brazil because these businesses run far and deep, and a lot of connections. And one of the people that he had upset was a guy called Carlos Moura, who was the head of naval intelligence at the time. You know, got his own estate, and you know, people had been on holiday there and visited, and there'd been accidents, as you can imagine. And so, so we'd been going back to Brazil, and one of my underlying fears was that some of the people that he'd gone against had federal weight. They had the police in the pockets and things like that. Well, you know, anything can happen in Sao Paulo, anything can happen in Rio, anything can happen in Fortaleza. But the more you start going to the northeast, it's more like the last frontier. It's like the jungle on one side and the sea on the other. And if my thing is that if we got stopped and a corrupt policeman says they resisted arrest, so I shot them, who's going to say any different? Who's going to do any different? And that was always my fear there, is that we lacked that. We just lacked that real-time communication, and we lacked the process to log anything, or successfully log anything in the event of anything happening. So we were really, I mean, there was just me and him, and it just, yeah. So
would you say that was your scariest experience?
I think because we were there for 5 and 6 weeks at a time, and these are places where Brazil is not a place to act up. It's like Russia. You don't start playing up there, because you cannot come home. So we were in Brazil, and whilst they were great places, it is just a place where anything can happen, and frequently does. And you'll never just never hear about it, We
just watched Benedict not come home, didn't we?
Right.
Like the film, what was it called? The Courier. It's,
oh no, I don't know that.
Brilliant film.
Really, yeah.
About an English spy who heads over to Russia.
Oh, yeah. I can imagine.
Yeah, so, definitely worth a watch.
Yeah, I will do. Yeah, definitely. I'll definitely have a look at something like that. Yeah. So we were out there. Had a great time. Went all over, we took an holiday to Barbados, all paid for by the Russians. And, they said, listen, get out there, Neil, and, you're not here to be punished, so have an holiday yourself and all that.
Oh, wow,
and
that's the first.
Yeah, we went to Sandy Lane, and sort of like all laid on, and it was a great thing. Good thing,
What about the Maltese Falcon?
Speak to Jen / Shaun.
Yeah. So that is a situation where...
He's phrasing this one carefully.
Yeah, someone came to me and said, I know this guy. I said, oh yeah, I know this guy. He needs help. He's tagged, and he's going to get extradited back to Sweden. Okay, what's he done for to be extradited back to Sweden? He's sort of misappropriated sort of hundreds of millions out of the Swedish pension fund.
Oh shit!
So they were asking me if I could facilitate sort of getting him away from that extradition, So
I do remember the details of this actually.
What happened?
He told us at dinner, but I think for in the interest of national security, we cannot elaborate.
Yeah. So anyway, I had to refuse. And
you did, yeah? I love that.
I had to refuse and say I can't help you on that one.
That was hardcore.
Yeah.
Oh, shame.
Yeah.
Shame the viewers
And
will
then
never experience this.
meeting Big Joe Egan.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was staying in an hotel in Doncaster, and it's a place where a lot of boxers had been previously, just tons and tons of world champions. And there's a guy in Doncaster, an ex-professional rugby player called Andy Booker, who had that connection with Mike Tyson, so on and so forth. Tons of boxers, anybody. Joe Calzaghe had been there. Anthony Joshua had been there. Although I have met Anthony Joshua because I trained at his gym in in London, BXR on Chiltern Street. So I'd met him before.
What's he like?
He was a nice guy. He just
Yeah.
won world title a week before from Klitschko, and he's a good guy. He's a good guy. You know, or he beat Klitschko the week before. But I met him. He was a nice guy. Come up shaking hands. But then again, you see, I was in his gym, and it's an extortionate amount of money to be membership, and I'm sure he thought that I'd paid, but I hadn't. I was there with one of these guys who the Russians were paying for. So that's how I was there. But he come up shaking hands anyway. Very nice fella. But I'd met Tim Witherspoon, former 2-time world heavyweight champion, at this hotel. Trained with him, and the guy who has the hotel had said to me, look, Joe Egan's here, this, that and the other. I've told him about you, and you should introduce yourself if you see him about, because he'd like to meet you. So that's more or less what happened. Joe was in the gym I went down to train, he was already there, and he introduced me, I've heard all about you, and obviously I've heard all about him type thing. And we just got on famously.
He's a great guy.
Yeah, fantastic guy. And, he was just... and so much so that's how come I met you, Shaun and Jen. So,
all the privilege is ours.
And check out the podcast we did with Big Joe Egan, from Mike Tyson to Michael Francis, his stories, and also check out his book, which we have published for him, Big Joe Egan, the toughest white man on the planet, as described by Mike Tyson.
And I suspect he is as well.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah. He's in Man Mountain, So yeah, great guy.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, out of everything you've been through in your entire life,
firstly, who's the favourite that you've looked after?
Probably the guy for the Russians. I had a good carry on with him. He was demanding at times. He was challenging at times, but we had a good carry on. You know what I mean? And he'd got a few quid. And he wasn't shy about looking after me with it, I mean, great aftershaves, great but bought me great shoes.
Treats you like a princess.
But he tried to palm me off with some Versace stuff that clearly not me. And I had to say no, thank you. But great guy.
Closest to death moment.
Probably in Baghdad, somewhere along the line. I lived in an hotel called the Alhambra. It was used as basically as the line for the mortars from Al Qaeda. So any drop shot or anything like that with a mortar, or and there were plenty of attacks and things like that. So yeah, I mean, there's been quite a few, to be fair. It's so that I won't be able to pick one, but there's quite a few along the way.
Is it going off all throughout the night? You can hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Did you just not sleep under those conditions?
No,
or?
I mean. One night there was sort of some firefight, and we went out onto the balcony, and the rounds were whizzing past literally on the balcony. So it's like, so yeah, it's just a bit day in, day out, and you're a bit like, it's like when you used to do 2 months on, 1 month off, and when you came home for that month, it'd take like sort of a week to settle down. And then the last week would be getting yourself geared up mentally and physically to go back. So there really was only ever 2 weeks off, if you know what I mean. But yeah, a lot of situations that I've been through, Wow.
Are you going to get a book out about your life?
Hint.
That depends if you're going to write it for me, Shaun. If you're going to write it for me, the answer is yes.
We will publish it, but we've got to figure out a way it's going to get written.
Yeah. Well, I'll leave that in you and Jen's capable hands. Yeah.
In conclusion, Neil, is there anything you'd like to say to the viewers?
I'd just like to say, I hope it's been entertaining for you, and thanks ever so much for listening.
Yeah, it was really well structured, just going from all these hot spots of the world, basically, wasn't it?
I'm sure we've got many more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Held a few
Yeah.
back
We can always. There's always plenty more to put in. I just thought I'd give you the bare bones, So we can always. Yeah.
So let us know in the comments what you thought of today's video. If you fancy some organic cotton clothing, Boomer and Jen. Links in the description box.
Come give us a hug.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Oh, absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Fantastic, Neil.
Cheers,
You're a
buddy.
natural speaker.
Cheers, Shaun.
Yeah, brilliant.
Thank you.